What actually made you go into sports, and why actually you got into sports? If you could just tell us.
Good question. So, my first inspiration was my dad, who was into a lot of fitness and exercise. So, like a little kid, monkey see, monkey do, whatever dad used to do, monkey just used to follow, and that's how I just automatically got into this field. I started off with playing a lot of tennis, a bit of athletic, football, rugby, got hooked on to rugby, and then just stayed with rugby for a long. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, tell me, is there was going abroad to pursue a degree related to sports always part of the plan, or is that just something that happened, as it came?
It was definitely part of the plan to go abroad because I learned very early in my career that if I want to make a career in sport and exercise, now this was about 10-15 years back, right? We did not have an ISST at that time. I knew if I wanted to make a career in sport, I had to go abroad and learn sport and exercise from the best. So it was definitely part of my plan.
So, do you think it was crucial to your career at that point of time to pursue a degree in sports or performance coaching abroad rather than staying back in India and taking the conventional route for people who want to pursue that in India?
100% yes, because like I said, at that time, there was nothing at all in terms of sport and exercise in India. And whatever I learned when I went abroad, when I went to New Zealand, what I see is people are getting to learn that right now. So what I learned like 8 years back, I'm seeing people applying the same stuff right now. So it definitely put me much forward, much more ahead in my career at that time. So definitely, yes, it was very crucial for me to go abroad, and it's helped me be where I am today.
Right. So I believe you have a degree in psychology. That was one of your primary degrees. So how has that helped you become a better coach or shape your entire sports career the way it has actually turned out till now?
Honestly speaking, I don't remember anything I learned in that degree. Yeah, I pursued psychology because I wanted to get into sports psychology initially. But the sports psychologist that I was working with, she asked me to look for courses that are more comprehensive because she also used to counsel me at that time, and she realized it at that time that I am made more for being on the field and being out there and helping people instead of being like enclosed in a room and counseling people. So she asked me to look for something more comprehensive, which has psychology, but it also has sports science in it. So yeah, to answer your question, to be honest, I did not get anything out of that degree, but there was a reason why I chose psychology. Also, apart from the fact that going into arts would give me more freedom to play. So, yeah.
Right. So as a woman in this industry, I'm pretty sure you must have come over certain obstacles that, not many men in the industry face. Could you tell us more about that? Or, we have a lot of females that are trying to get into the sports industry, but they're a bit hesitant because of, maybe the stigma that is related to because it's, sports is a male-dominated type of field.
Yeah.
So do you have anything, you can share for women that are trying to pursue careers in sports?
A lot. It definitely is hard. I'll be honest. It definitely is hard being a female S&C coach in this industry because it is so male dominant, and somehow people just tend to trust male coaches more than female coaches. And maybe part of it is because as women, I'm talking about my own self now, I wasn't very bold. I wasn't very confident with my own competence. So I learned it quite early in my career that if I want to make a mark in this industry as a female S&C coach, I need to be very, very bold with whatever I do. I need to be able to let the person in front of me know exactly what I want, and I need to be very, very confident with my skills. And that confidence comes with competence. So yes, there is a stigma, but at the same time, there is a stigma for a reason. Let's be honest, male S&C coaches do have greater exposure. That's why they are kind of better, slightly better than women coaches. And we do need to work harder, definitely, but it's not impossible.
Okay, so since we're on the subject of women, how does the way you perform a particular SNC program or train a particular female change depending on what phase of the menstrual cycle they're in? Because it's not talked about enough. When you're coaching a male and when you're coaching a female, it's two different things. It's like apples and oranges, because there's so much that is around, how the menstrual cycle affects not just the psychology, but the body of a woman, the hormones, and you know better. So how does your way, the technical way of you giving a particular protocol change when you're dealing with a female athlete?
That's a very broad question, and it's a very, very important question, definitely, Vinita. How does my approach change? Acutely, you need to basically first think of what the priority is. So, for example, a female athlete comes to me and says, I have a competition right now, but it's extremely painful. I don't know if I'll be able to perform at all. First thing that I'm going to think about is the competition adding any value to her? Okay, if it's like an Olympic event, then forget the health. Give her 2 painkillers, go, you're training. Weighted competition, I would put the ball in her court and say, look, you decide what you want to do. Same thing comes with training. If you have to gauge the situation and be kind of reactive to what's in front of you and how that decision is going to affect the athlete right now and then in the future. Okay, as a female, some athletes face a lot of issues with the menstrual cycle. Some athletes don't, and some athletes are somewhere in the middle where they're just not sure. So with experience, you do get to understand who needs to rest, who you can really push, and who needs more of education about, okay, yes, you are feeling the pain, but you can basically try and push that person's limits a little bit more and see where it takes. But that being said, being reactive we're just scratching the surface. It's like a huge iceberg. Why do I say that? Because like Vinita just pointed out, training men and training women is like apples and oranges. And whatever research that has been done till now, it's all on male athletes. And coaches just tend to take all of that research and apply it on female athletes. To give you an example, beetroot juice. Has everybody heard about the effects of beetroot juice? You don't have the same effects on females, but people are still adopting that research and using it on females, stuff like that. To give you an example, another example of training female and the training load. At Rugby India, we have coaches that come from a very male-dominant background who have trained with who have coached a lot of male athletes. Okay, and rugby is a very, very rough sport, so you need to train at very super high training loads. So whenever I used to go to camp, we used to have these coaches who used to put my female team through training sessions 3 times in a day, run them to the ground, and then just keep on going for like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then wonder why they're getting so many injuries, why their menstrual cycle is completely off. Well, I used to wonder about menstrual cycles because nobody else really had a clue about what's going on. I started tracking their menstrual cycles and started matching it with their training load. So training load, I just took their session RP and duration because we don't have any technology, right? And what I noticed is whenever we go in camp, you see a lot of menstrual cycle disruptions. So the basic ones that we see on the surface are oligomenorrhea, which is your cycle not being within the 21 to 35 day mark. Second is heavy bleeding or extremely light bleeding. Second is extremely painful, so dysmenorrhea, what they call it. Okay. Now these symptoms, along with clumsiness and lack of coordination, injuries around your ovulation time and all of that, this is only the surface that we're seeing. What we actually need to do to cater to female athletic needs, female physiological needs, is actually be more proactive and do a complete hormonal profile of each of your female athletes. So what do I mean by that? You track their hormones to blood profiles, or like you have urinary ovulation testing kits, and you actually have a look at their entire hormonal profile. So whether they are bleeding or not bleeding, you can have an athlete who is not ovulating. You can have an athlete who is not getting the estrogen peak. Are you guys kind of aware of how the menstrual cycle works? You guys are aware, right? Okay, cool. So you can have an athlete who is bleeding every 28 days or whatever, but maybe that athlete is not getting that estrogen peak. Maybe the athlete is not ovulating, okay? Maybe the athlete in the luteal phase is not getting that progesterone surge, So only by tracking whether an athlete is bleeding or not is not enough. It's good that you're doing it, but to go a step further, you need to be more proactive and get their hormonal profiles done. Coaches abroad have started doing this, but again, research is very, very limited in this field. So to answer your question, again, coming back to your question, when it comes to training female athletes, ideal situation, get their hormonal profiles done, make sure all their hormones are getting pulsated, are getting secreted at the right time in the right amount. The cycle length is between 21 to 35 days, etc., etc. Okay. Second thing is, for being proactive, I would say you gotta come up with training prescription different for females. You cannot have the same training load prescriptions and just shove it on your female athletes. You need to have more research coming in this field. I hope that makes sense.
So just because you spoke about it in your previous answer, you spoke a bit about technologies. As you know, the technology, even though some states in India have it now, we're not able to use it, apply it to normal amateur athletes. Is usually something that is, selectively used in terms of just elite athletes or,
Right.
per league athletes. So how do you think we can implement that, as India is still a developing country? How do you think we in general can use that technology and apply it so that, we can develop and, get a better result in sports in general?
I reckon it all comes down to educating not just the athlete, but educating the coach first and foremost. Because in a high performance culture, mostly it all starts from the coach. The coach decides the plan, and then everybody else comes underneath. So your S&C coach, your manager, players, physiotherapist, everything. Okay. So if the coach is very well educated and coach understands the importance of technology, it's going to be much easier for the nation as a whole to adopt it. Yeah.
So you've had quite a lot of experience, with athletes abroad and some athletes in India. So as you know, that gymming is something that has recently gotten a lot of craze in India. Like if you look at, less than for about 5 years, in the previous 5 years, you wouldn't have seen so many people go to the gym or work out or fitness. So when you prepare your athletes at the national or international level, you know that those athletes have already gone through strength training from an early stage in life. So how do you tackle and how do you prepare your athletes in accordance to that? Because you know that the competitors or the athletes that you're going to be against have already gotten that level of strength training from a very early phase, which until now was not as common in India. So what is your philosophy, or how do you tackle that situation, to help your athletes better?
Good question. To answer your question, firstly, the other athletes are just lucky because they got more training time, more training quality. Second is, I just try to do what's in my control. Okay. If they have less training age, they're obviously not going to be able to, their chances of performance are going to be lesser, definitely. Just because the other athletes have a greater advantage. They are much more stronger, powerful, fitter, everything. So not a lot that I can do. I can try and accelerate the process, but then it can come at the cost of the athlete's health at the same time. It again boils down to what your priority is. Is your priority performance at that particular time point? Is your priority health? Okay. So you can accelerate to some degree, but in the end, a child is born in 9 months. You can't really shorten that,
Right. So
does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you train athletes depending on, the on and off period? So how do you go about that? Since, some of us here are still, aspiring SLC coaches, aspiring sports scientists, a bit about, how they can actually go about developing in a SNC program and actually implementing it.
Question to you guys. Do you guys want to know about youth athlete? Do you want to know about high performance athlete? Youth athlete. So say around 10 to 14 years of age. I would go with the basic long-term athlete development model. Build a huge base of fundamental movement patterns. Start adding a bit of strength work, then power, then speed. As simple as that. But most important is huge base of fundamental movement patterns. But don't be afraid to start them early with your barbell training for sure. Some models do say only with body weight. After a certain stage, then you start adding other stuff. Don't be afraid to start barbells and dumbbells at a young age. Some of them grasp faster than the others. And that just comes with your experience training kids. I recently heard the right age to start is when the athlete in front of you is mature enough to understand what you're telling them and is mature enough to understand what is safe and not safe in the gym. Okay, so if you have a very an athlete who's not capable enough of understanding that's a very heavy dumbbell, it's going to injure me, okay, then regress it. So it all depends on what's in front of you. There's no age bar. Whenever the athlete is ready.
So considering that you worked abroad as well as India, so getting back to that, what are some of the differences or some of the differences you've experienced in your experience working as a coach there and as a coach here, or something that students now can keep in mind while they are working here or there, some trainings or some tips that you can give to the students?
The main difference that I saw in athletes over here and athletes abroad is, now I'm talking about New Zealand because I worked in New Zealand, not any other country. But I can talk from my experience of being a rugby player and watching other teams play as well. They are just much more physically literate than us. Much more physically literate, stronger, better strength capacity, better power. It's part genetics as well. But they just start early, man. They just start very, very early. And especially women in India, if you look at it, like even if I ask over here, what age did you start playing? Okay. You?
Even I started that.
How old were you?
8, 9.
8, 9. Okay. What about boys? 5. So generally you do see that difference where men will start early, women will start a little bit late. So men get a better advantage of, say, 5 years of greater physical literacy. So that's a major difference that I see in women over there and women over here, where we generally tend to start late as compared to women over there. And it's also in part the reason is we are kind of still, the culture is kind of still very male dominant as opposed to countries abroad. But again, it's just a general statement. It's not an absolute 100% right fact.
So how do we think we can tackle that?
Change the culture. But what's happening right now is good, right? With the government pumping in so much in sport and encouraging more and more athletes to get into sport, it's definitely going to change. Parents need to be much more encouraging in sending their daughters as well early on into sport, So it's just change the culture somehow.
So as a coach, you deal with, a lot of mentally strong, mentally weak athletes, and, you obviously it is a part of your job to, pick out on that and train them accordingly. So how does your coaching philosophy or coaching way change when an athlete is injured? Like, if someone is mentally weak and is still having an injury or mentally strong, so how do you alter your coaching strategies to cater to the need of the athlete?
So in terms of how do I handle him or her psychologically, is that what you're
asking? In general, like a holistic approach, how would you take that for an injured athlete?
How to deal with an injured athlete? Right. One lesson that I learned from my mentor in New Zealand, the first thing that he taught me when dealing with injured athletes is, should we always remember, whenever a lion is injured, he cannot stop. He has to keep moving no matter what. Because if he stops, either he is going to just wither away or someone else is going to eat him up. Same way, as an athlete, if you're injured, you can't just sit at home and rest. Because you're going to basically go through entropy. Your fitness is going to go down. and it's going to be much harder for you to bounce back. And secondly, someone else is just going to come in and take your place. So point number one, do not stop training no matter what. You have one limb injured, train the other limb. You have your upper body injured, you go on a bike, So you keep training no matter what. Secondly, dealing with injured athletes is kind of tricky because you need to train but do no further harm, okay? So you need to have a little bit of experience / understanding in how injuries heal, how wounds heal, the whole inflammatory phase, proliferative phase, and all of that. And you need to be in constant communication with the physiotherapist. And whatever plan you make, you need to run it through the physiotherapist and make sure you get a green tick from the physiotherapist. First thing is make the athlete understand that you cannot afford to stop training unless you want to just completely give up. And secondly, you need to have a good background in injury management. And thirdly, how to program with your SNC stuff, which we guys already know.
So if an athlete was close to give up, how would you try to change his or her mind? The athlete has, a lot of potential, but he or she is just on the verge of giving up.
That will come with, that's a very tricky situation, and it all depends on what your relationship is with the athlete. If you've built a strong bond and the athlete really trusts you, then it's going to be very easy to get that athlete out. And at that point, you just really need to just let the athlete know that you're there with them. Obviously, drive them towards getting psychological help for sure, because that's where they're going to get the maximum advantage. But just let the athlete know that you're there for them. That makes a huge difference.
So what is your way to, create a good coach-athlete relationship or a coach-athlete bond? What is the ideal way you go about so that, you have that positive impact or influence on the athletes that you train?
I think just spend a lot of time with the athlete, trying to understand the athlete, trying to empathize with the athlete and trying to understand their story, okay? So what you see in front is not actually what's going on at the back. So you try to understand the story behind that story and try to connect to that story. Once you connect to that story, it's much easier to build that rapport, that bond. And like I mentioned in my earlier chat with ISST, you need to come from a place of care, okay? No matter what degree you have, whether you are a master, PhD, you're excellent in that Excel, whatever it is, if you don't show that care, you're never going to be able to build that relationship with the athlete. So if you tell your athlete, hey, I'm just a phone call away, are you really a phone call away? If you're not, it's fine, but just be authentic. Let the athlete know whatever it is, So come from a place of care, understand the story behind the story and try to connect to that story and just be authentic. Don't go behind overacting or just be yourself.
So you've played rugby, you've played rugby also, but you've coached rugby, you've coached boxing, table tennis, and I think quite a lot of other sports. So could you just tell us, your experience of coaching different sports, and maybe if you have a personal favorite, you can tell us about that as well.
My personal favorite is a no-brainer. I have played rugby all my life, so it's definitely rugby. I enjoy the most training rugby players, being on the field, watching my players perform. Different experiences would be just the personality of athletes coming from different backgrounds. Like, for example, when I train with wrestlers or then judokas or boxers, most of them come from very humble backgrounds, and they have had to struggle a lot in their life. So you can see they are much more resilient. You throw whatever at them, they will take it. To give you an example, I had this one wrestler who I had to get tested, and it was a 2,000 meter row test. And she asked me, "Madam ji, kya karna hai?" So I said, "Just finish it as fast as possible." She's like, "Okay." She went on to the rower. She went hard out on the rower, and believe me when I say this, she passed out. She finished the whole test and she passed out. And that kind of heart, that kind of Jidari, what they call it in Haryanvi. I haven't seen it in a lot of other sports codes. Rugby you will see, because rugby generally has a very strict go hard or go home, or like an army sort of a culture. So you would see in rugby. Other sports where you get more educated players, more affluent players who have not gone through that grind, you would not see that same attitude. You would see somewhat an individualistic attitude in individual sports, obviously, and they might come across as selfish, but that's just the nature of the sport, and you have to accept the athlete as they are and learn to deal with that. Team sports, generally, you will get more of a team culture and like solidarity. You'll see more solidarity. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So in the beginning, you spoke a bit about your father. So other than your father, is there anyone that has, helped you become the person or helped you become the coach or helped to develop this career in sports the way it is today?
Wow, a lot of them actually. I've come across surprisingly a lot of men who have actually helped me get better as a coach. That surprisingly was actually, what do you say? Sarcastic, yeah. But my rugby coach, definitely. Then my rugby coaches, I would say, in India, in New Zealand, the coaches I worked with at Inspire Institute, and a lot of other coaches. So I actually can't name all of them on my fingers, because there are a lot of coaches. And I just learned to be a sponge as I grew through this career, right? Like whoever I met, I just learned to take away something from them. So I can't really pinpoint and say this is the person or, that I learned from a lot. Yes, definitely female coaches, but I would say the ratio is again like a 1:10 or something like that.
Right. So before we open it for questions to students, if you have any message for our students from today's, if you have anything that you want to say to them, just please feel free to do so.
Take home message would.
Sure. I think now that PhDs activities, how do we see where you go immediate career after when you back with it? Nay, not actually if that anymore.
If you can I quiet on bad warning, does be cheating.
Okay, after graduation. So fresh off the books.
No.
Or generally.
We other is the people's part.
Okay.
If you are able to be that quiet out.
Okay. So the first one would be you need to study a lot. SNC is not easy. And you guys are lucky you have people like ISST over here, institutions like ISST. You have ready-made tools over here, right? When I got into the industry, it was only YouTube. Yeah. You can still learn from YouTube, definitely. But I'm just saying you guys are lucky you already have such a big facility, such a good facility available. Don't take it for granted. Study a lot. Like even now, I am still going back to lessons on physics, on chemistry, on statistics, algebra, everything. Okay, so if you really want to be a good SNC coach, you need to study a lot. You need to be able to apply that in your practice. So practice a lot. Go find a mentor. Tell them that I'll work for you for free. Okay, give me a bunch of clients or whatever. I'll set up cons for you, Shadow a mentor, get a mentor. Get as much experience as possible under your belt. Thirdly would be authentic in whatever you do. If you don't know something, just say, I'm sorry, I don't know it. And I'll study on it and then I'll get back to you. Fourth one would be keep your ego aside. It's not going to take you anywhere. Okay. Even I have had ego issues. Even I have lost a lot of opportunities because of that. And you learn through it. Learn from my mistakes. Keep your ego aside. That's the biggest killer of your career. Not just at SNC, but wherever you go. Practice what you preach. Okay? You cannot be an unfit trainer. End of story. If you are telling someone to do a 100-meter sprint, you need to be able to show them how to do 100 meters. Time and again, train in front of your athletes. Show them you do what they do as well. Okay? Because your athletes want to see you get hurt, I'm telling you. The moment your athletes see that you also love going through the grind, you will get better buy-in from them. Another would be, as you start working with different organizations and different teams, it's not just going to be you and the athlete. It's going to be you, the coach, the physiotherapist, the manager, the hydrotherapist. There's so many, like earlier it used to be just the coach, the player, and now it's like a huge team of other staff as well coming in. So you need to build your interpersonal skills very well. What Tanvi and I were talking about just a while ago, you need to be able to learn how to give good interviews. You need to be able to learn how to be professional. So stuff like be before time, dress up for your job very well, show up every single day whenever you have to, learn to write good emails, for example, learn what to say on a call, what not to say on a call, learn what is appropriate, learn to set boundaries, learn to respect boundaries. So all the back-end work is very, very important. I see a lot of coaches nowadays who do not have a degree, but they are just so good at handling the person in front of them that they just get ahead in the industry. That does not mean don't get a degree. It's very important. But this side is probably equally important. And yeah, that's about it. Dr. Kirsty Elliott Sales. I will give you the names later. There's Dr. Stacey Sims. I have been following these two a lot, and they have a lot of, not a lot, but they've done considerable amount of work in female athlete physiology. I will give you a list of names. I do have a few more names on my mind. I'll share it with you, Vipul, at some point. And it's definitely the need of the hour at this point. We just don't know what the female athlete is going through right now in terms of their menstrual cycle disturbances. So I think all of you should go through it. As in, learn it. When athlete doesn't perform, if something is wrong, definitely. You test. You keep testing, right? Pre-testing, post-testing. You have certain KPIs that you set with the athlete on day one. And then you see 6 months down the line, did you achieve those KPIs? Yeah, you did a good job. Then you did not do a good job. You can still come up with KPIs. I mean, anyone can come up with KPIs. It doesn't have to be that you need experience to come up with KPIs. Key performance indicators. So let's take an example. Athlete comes in, I sit with him or her. I ask them what your long-term goal is, what your short-term goal is. Write it down. Then you try and break that. So, for example, an athlete comes in, a tennis player comes in and says, I want to work more on my recovery. Once I hit a shot close to the lobby, I want to work more on getting back to the center as fast as possible. Then you start thinking about, you put your SNC lens on, and then you start thinking about, how do I work on this particular aspect in the weights room? And then you come up, okay, that's more of lateral force production that I need to work on. I need to work on her reactive strength. She needs to have very strong ankles, and she needs to be good at changing direction while controlling her trunk. Whatever, I'm just coming up with it. Make sense? What went well? What did not go well? What can be improved? 2-3 points each. Because that is a very good point. It's very important for you to reflect, especially as a fresher. So keep a notebook and keep reflecting on every session. What went well, what did not go well, what can be improved. And then over time, as you get used to it with experience, you just start taking mental notes of it. But yeah, keep it simple. It's definitely promising, but I cannot say anything right now. Can't tell anything right now, honestly. I have a very neutral answer, to be honest. It's a very fun game to watch because it's just 7 minutes each half. There's tackling, there's cutting, it's very, very fun to watch it. So I am expecting a big crowd, definitely. But at the same time, I'm not sure the sustainability aspect of it yet. We're just trying it out anyway. So hopefully we will get a good number. If the main thing is viewership, if we get a really good viewership, then we can really promote it. Very, very valid point. And I do get that a lot, especially when I was into rugby coaching. I used to get that a lot from my parents. And yeah, let's accept it. It is a rough sport. But again, SNC comes into the picture. If you build really, really strong, robust athletes, the injury rate goes down massively. So that's one angle I hit it from. Other angle I hit it from is it's an Olympic sport now, So there's definitely a lot of scope in putting your child in rugby, considering it's an Olympic sport, albeit about 7 years down. I have to agree to that point. You're absolutely spot on. It's definitely a challenge. And it's a very valid point. Any parent would want to think twice before putting an athlete into a contact sport, be it rugby or be it wrestling or any other, even boxing. Boxing is quite dangerous. But hey, people can be quite crazy and you can see the numbers going up, right? So I don't have an answer to that question. Indian athlete. It depends on their cultural background a lot, what religion they follow. Definitely. You will find a lot of athletes who are absolutely vegetarian and they just don't budge at all. You will find a few athletes that have turned non-vegetarian just for the sport. And yeah, to answer your question, there's no what do you say, an average sort of a diet. You're asking what is the mean, right? It's very varied. You won't find a typical sort of a pattern in each athlete. Do I see these trends in India? No. Do I prescribe? No, because that's not my realm. I give basic guideline as to what to eat, what not to eat before, after. But then it's just like 1%. 99% is done by the nutritionist. I don't fall into it unless asked for.
Thank you so much. And a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Hope you learned some things. Specifically, the sports science students, what are the specific things you require to excel in the industry? Thank you again, Surabhi, and looking forward to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you for listening to my jabber all this while.
Hi, we'll have a quick group photo.